back when I was racing, started off racing pure stock. Me and Carl was racing at the track, and then Carl wanted to do other things on Saturday night when sometimes he'd go hunting or fishing or whatever. And so here I was at the racetrack, kind of by myself. One night, I think I'd finished second or third at the race, and after I got finished, a lot of people come down in from the grandstands into the pits. And one night I'd pull my trailer, my race car off the track, and coming off the track, the inside is kind of muddy. And when I went to get the car up on the trailer, I gave a little gas, the tire spun, and it spun off the loading ramps. So I'm sitting there scratching my head, what am I going to do? The three deaf guys came down into the pits, looking around at the race cars. They saw my dilemma. A guy named Ron Owens, who's strong as an ox, he looked at what the situation was, grabbed his buddies, Craig Smith and Charles Gibbons, all three deaf guys. They picked up the back of my Monte Carlo, put it back on the ramps, and I got it back up on the thing. And I'm scratching my head saying, whoa, this is great. Some helpers. Because they were deaf, not a lot of people, could communicate with them and didn't want to maybe or whatever, but they were three really nice guys. So so I asked him, I said, somehow I think I wrote it down or read lips or whatever. I said, come over to Carl's garage Monday night. I said, if you can help me work on race cars. Boy, they eat that up because nobody had, asked them to help on their race car. So those three guys came over, we changed the oil, switched tires around, cleaned the air cleaner, and they were just having a ball working on that race car. So then they came over to Carl's that next Saturday afternoon. We loaded up the car and loaded the tires and the toolbox in the truck and the spare gas and whatever. And we headed off to the racetrack, and they got the racetrack, and they were just tickled to death to be part of a race car team. And I think at the time we got some T-shirts with their name on it, and they were just really happy to be part of a race team. And if you see some of the pictures, won a lot of races that they enjoyed being in Victory Lane with the checkered flag, and just three really nice guys, very devoted. I talked to some people at Fairtech. They worked with Charles to teach him how to do some welding. I talked to Steve Core. He said he would get Ron Owens and enrolled in the automotive technology program. So Ron went out there, learned how to build transmissions and work on motors, and it was a good learning experience for him. Steve Core took a lot of time to help him and train him to work on race cars, and they just really had a ball working on race cars and being part of the team. And so, unfortunately, Ron passed away several years ago, and Charles passed away too. Craig's still around, still goes to the races, but Charles Gibbons and Ron Owens was a very valuable part of my racing team. Thomas Pope was kind of amazed at it. He actually did a front page article about the three guys one time in the Fayetteville Observer. The Wilmington Star picked it up. They ran that article in it, and Thomas told me some other newspapers picked it up off the Associated Press and ran it in some other newspapers because it was kind of a unique story. Three deaf guys working on a race car. So really have good memories of those three guys, and I really appreciate their help.
Hello, my name is Pete Corey from Crescent, New York. Moved down to North Carolina about 12 years ago, and I built a show car looking like my dad's car in 1967. I built it so I could remember everything that was there. The car's pretty cool. Got a Flemke front end, straight springs in the back, big block, 427. I had to redo the whole car from one end right to the other. There ain't one piece I haven't rebuilt on this thing. The car's a 1936 Chevy 5-window coupe. It's got a handbrake in it, power steering. Dad lost his leg May 7th, 1960 at Fonda. Hit the wall, and they 4x4 came through the car, grabbed the headers, and pinned him in the car. By the time they got him out, he ended up losing his lower part of his left leg. So now he can't feel the brake. So Dad put a handbrake in, and That's what, I got a handbrake in this. I got a Moon gas pedal just like he had. I tried to build it just like he did, only a long time ago.
A lot of people's asked me over the years how I got to be a race car photographer. I started out in 1969. Me and my brother went up to Martinsville Speedway to look at the modifieds run along with the late models. They had the Cardinal 500, Dogwood 500, 250 laps late model Sportsman, 250 laps modifieds. We always enjoyed going up that. My daddy had just bought a new camera. I borrowed it from him, went up to the track, took a few pictures. The next race I came back, I had a 8x10 of some of the race car drivers. I was going to get them to sign and autograph it for me, and a couple of them wanted to buy the pictures. So all of a sudden, a little light bulb went out of my head. So let's take some pictures and sell them. So I went and bought a kind of a professional camera and started learning photography. And then in 1973, Pat Purvis, who owned the track out at what we call the Old Fayetteville Speedway, which is no longer there. Pat Purvis was the owner, him and his father, George Purvis Sr. Pete Fan was running the track. He hired me to come out, and he had all the drivers line up on the hill, they called it, up there where you go across the track into number one turn. And I took pictures of Glenn McDuffie, Carl Smith, Tommy Tompkins, just all the race car drivers at that time, Ray Mason. And then he was he had me make some small size pictures, and he was selling them in the concession stand for fans and people to buy them through the concession stand. And then I'd go down on the track after the race and take pictures of the winners, and then I could sell those to the pit crew and whoever won the race. And then I learned how to take action shots in 1973 and 1974. And then just started people finding out I was a professional photographer, started doing weddings, wound up doing about 1,150 weddings. And just once I got kind of pretty good at it, I went up and did some NASCAR races. I was actually Bill Elliott's first photographer. His first race was at Rockingham, I believe it was 76, and I was the only one to get a picture of him then. Dale Earnhardt had drove race cars at Cumberland, the asphalt track, in 76 and 77, and I was taking pictures of him at the time. Nobody really knew who he was other than he was Ralph Earnhardt's son. He would come in and with just a pickup and a open wheel trailer. And one night he'd won the week before. I had his picture in Victory Lane. So I asked him, I said, Dale, here's your picture. He said, I don't have the money right now. I got to buy some tires. He said, see me after the race. So he won the race, obviously, and then paid me for his Victory Lane picture. So in that time, Morgan Shepherd, Ray Hendricks, Sam Ard, all those guys would come and race at the asphalt Cumberland track. And I remember one week, Dale came in. He had somebody with him, a young pretty lady, and he says, I got a new girlfriend. He says, when I win, he didn't say if I win, he says, when I win, I want you to bring her out on the front stretch so I can get a picture with her in Victory Lane. So sure enough, found out who she was, because I knew her uncle. Her uncle's Tommy Houston. Her father's Hal Houston, and I met both those guys up at Hickory and Martinsville when I was taking pictures up there at those tracks. So sure enough, Dale won, and she was a little shy, but I took her by the hand, took her out on the front straightaway there up by the flag stand, got a picture of her and Dale. And as far as I know, that's the first pictures ever taken of Dale Earnhardt and Teresa Earnhardt together. So it was a lot of fun taking pictures of Dale when he first started, and Bill Elliott, because the first race that Bill Elliott raced at Darlington, he didn't have anything on the side of his car. It was number 52, plain car, just a few decals on the front. Nobody knew who he was. And his wife, I think his wife's name was Star, and nobody else was taking pictures of him because he was kind of starting in the back, and everybody else taking pictures of Cale Yarborough and Richard Petty and David Pearson. So I moseyed on back and started taking pictures of all the guys at the back of the pack that were just starting, and a lot of them, and it got pretty famous. And because of that, I was probably the only one to get pictures of those, what I call famous drivers to be. So going to all the different tracks, meeting a lot of people in the NASCAR community, and getting a lot of pictures published in magazines and newspapers. It's been a lot of fun.
Okay, as you can see, the car has been all hand lettered. There's no vinyl on this car whatsoever. And that's the way it was in the day. And the Crescent Hillbilly, there's a story behind that. One of my dad's friends got mad at him And one day, and he called him the Crescent Hillbilly because where Dad lived in Crescent, it was wild timber. And they ended up with that name, and it stuck for the rest of his racing career. It was always on a car.
Racing in, and you know, some races stick out more than others. One especially I remember, had gone to photograph a wedding, and I'd done a lot of racers' weddings and their brides, and so I'd gone to do a wedding, and I didn't get to qualify that night in a pure stock car, and I was running for the points that year, and so I really had to be there, but I didn't get back to the racetrack till about 8 o'clock after the wedding and reception. There was about 21 cars that had qualified, and I had to start last. But we ran last, thank goodness, because the 454 Monte Carlo number 13, it would always do better when the track got hard like asphalt, because when it was muddy, those leaf spring Camaros would outrun me. But once the track got hardened out, and I could go. So anyway, we started 21st that night, worked my way up and won the race. And that was the beginning of that year. I won 4 straight. And then Mike Bullock wanted to protest me. His car owner didn't think I could win 4 straight, but they tore it down, and it was bone stock 454. So that was one race that was very special for me, starting at the rear and coming through winning the race. Another race that was really important was the night I had to run in 3 different classes. In 1988, I was running in the points, and I was trying to keep my points up. I was running late model, which I finished, I believe it was 1988. I finished 4th in the late model points and finished 2nd in the pure stock points. So that particular night, I had to get 3 race cars there because they were having an enduro race that night. And Joe Swan and I, we were putting together a Camaro to run in the enduro race. And so between running all 3 classes, the late models, the pure stock, and the enduro, and I think we finished 2nd in the enduro that night. Finished probably 2nd or 3rd in the pure stock, finished I think 5th in the late model. So it was a pretty good night for racing. At least I finished all 3 of the races that night. That was pretty good. But I think the race that more people mention to me than any other race is that probably about 83 or 4, somewhere along in there, Donald Ray Autry running the track said somebody talked him into doing what's called spectator races, where people just pull their car out of the parking lot, put it on the track. And the way he decided to do it was put 2 cars side by side at the start-finish line, and he would drop the green flag from a dead start. You take off and you come back around, you run 1 lap, and whoever gets back to the checker flag first, they won that particular part of the thing. So you had to draw to see what number you started, and then if you won that race, you had to race the next man up who run number 2. If you drew number 1, you had to race number 2, and whoever won between race 2, number 1 and 2 had to race car who drew number 3 till all the cars had finished. That night, 18 people, or some people said 18 idiots, pulled their stock passenger car out on the track, lined up side by side, and raced 1 lap. So I'd always wanted to be a race car driver in the early 80s, and I didn't have a race car, so I did have a 454 73 Corvette, and which had wide tires on it. So I pulled it out there, and that night I drew number 1, and I had to race everybody that night that was in there. So I ran 16 races that night to win the spectator race. I think it was $100 that Donald Ray paid. And then the next week they had it again. I forget how it came about. The second week I did it, but anyway, I won that race. And then the third week they had it. Dwayne Parker had borrowed somebody that had a Firebird. I think it's a 400 Firebird 4-speed. I think it had a little work done to it. So it came down between me and Dwayne Parker that night to race for the final race in the spectator race. We took off side by side, went in the number 1 turn. He had the inside and I had the outside, so we were kind of running side by side. I was kind of watching my door to make sure he didn't slide up into me. Then when we got on the back straightaway, I pushed it hard as I could down the back straightaway. I left him. He pulled in behind me going into turn 3 and 4. And then as I was going into turn 3, I stayed low in the groove. He went on the outside of me and pulled out kind of, we came down the front straightaway almost side by side, but I beat him. So that was 3 straight races that a lot of people question my sanity putting a fiberglass Corvette out on the track racing against other people on the dirt track. But anyway, that's something that I always remember at the racetrack, and just had a lot of fun times racing people and meeting a lot of friends. And again, the biggest trophy that I got that I'm most proud of is I got the sportsmanship trophy one year, and finished second 3 times in the points. I just couldn't outrun that Mike Bullock. He was tough. But anyway, it was pretty good to finish second 3 years. But it was good fun. I got to meet a lot of nice people. Got to learn a little bit about mechanics. The first car was number 23, Monte Carlo, with Carl Smith building it. We took turns driving it, and found out real quick that Carl was a much better mechanic than I was, and I was a much better driver than he was. So worked out pretty good. He kept the car up, and I drove it. We had good fun with that car over there on Dunn Road. And then every now and then Mr. Burt Kitchen would come in, and he would help us work on the car a little bit, but he wouldn't ever help us that much because he wouldn't help us enough so we could outrun him. But we had a lot of fun between the Kitchen boys and myself and Miss Dorothy over there at her house, eating some good food every now and then. A lot of fun. So racing memories are good. I hope I don't get Alzheimer's, so I can always remember these great racing memories. One of the first things about getting the race car to the track, when I first started, most people would put a trailer bar on the race car and put that like a little Y-shaped bar and hook it to a trailer hitch on a pickup or car, no trailer at all. And then they graduated to what we call just an open wheel trailer. And when I started in the 70s and 80s racing, gosh, there was no enclosed hauler. I mean, the first one that ever came to the track, it was like the Taj Mahal had showed up with somebody with an enclosed trailer. And I remember when I was maybe 16 years old going down the road on 95 or 301, and I'd see a race car come by on a trailer, I would just get so excited that here I can look and see race cars on an open wheel trailer going down the road, and now all you can see is enclosed trailers. I don't know, it's amazing how we put a couple toolboxes and a couple spare tires in the back of the pickup bed, and a jack stand and an extra can of fuel, and roll the car up on an open wheel trailer and tie it down and just go racing. And you know, that was just, I think it was so much inexpensive that days. Today you kind of have to keep up with the Joneses as far as open, you know, your nice trailer, your nice hauler and all that, just to kind of show up and not have to, you know, be embarrassed. But I don't know, everybody showed up with just an old beat up pickup and a trailer back in the day, and just a toolbox, and it was just where people could race back those days. So I was lucky to be part of that. A lot of famous car drivers came through the Fayetteville area that raced at Cumberland or that raced at the dirt track. Here's a picture of Ernie Irvin driving John Atkinson's 6-cylinder, and he won a lot of races in that car, and then he got famous and moving on up to NASCAR. So this is a picture of Ernie Irvin at Dublin, the dirt track. Tiny Lund has raced at the old Fayetteville Speedway, I call it. Kyle Petty came there one night at running at the old Fayetteville Speedway. Terry Labonte came there and ran one night. Obviously Dale Earnhardt, Morgan Shepherd, Harry Gant, all those guys ran at the Cumberland track when it was asphalt. And so just a lot of famous NASCAR drivers that came through Fayetteville racing at either the old Fayetteville Speedway or the Cumberland International track when it was asphalt. Another important person that really helped me a whole lot in racing is Joe Swan. Joe was probably 15 or 16, 17 years old, hanging out right down the road from Carl's garage, and he'd come down there every now and then to see what was going on. And so some nights he would come out and help us at the racetrack with the pure stock and the late model. And then sometimes I'd build an enduro, and maybe the deaf guys would be working on the pure stock, and me and Joe would start working on the enduro. So this is a particular race that I won in a Camaro that Joe helped me. I heard Mike Parker call it gutting the car. So we gutted the Camaro and made an enduro out of it, and we won that night. And so Joe come out and joined me in victory lane with that Camaro. I think we won $1,000 that night, and I think there was like 50 or 60 cars there that night. But I'm not sure if this was the night, but there was one night that about 60 cars started, and I was just kind of hanging around at the back waiting for everybody to wreck and either blow up their motor or overheat or whatever. So I was just kind of riding, making sure I stayed in the lead lap. And then by lap 50, because they ran 100 lap then, about lap 50, about half the field was gone, but I was still on the lead lap. And then a couple of guys that was leading, they had flat tires or whatever. So next thing I know, my pit crew, I think it was Joe, went out there and held up number one and said that we were leading the race. So I had about a half lap lead on the second man. And then as I was going down the back straightaway, I had a half a lap on the second place man. At the time, I didn't know who it was, but it was Marvin Lester, who was in the second place car. My car was faster than him, but I wanted to make sure my tires were okay or overheating my motor, so I kind of slowed way down because I had about a half lap lead. Then all of a sudden I noticed that Marvin Lester's brother goes down there in the third turn holding his hands wide apart like I've got a big lead and telling me to slow down because I had a big lead. And I'm thinking, why is he doing that? And then all of a sudden, at the time I didn't know Marvin was driving the second place car. So I slowed down, make sure I took care of the car because it was like 10 or 15 laps to go. And then I looked at my bumper, looked at my rear mirror, and getting close to my rear bumper was Marvin Lester. And I realized what was going on then, that his brother had told me to slow down so Marvin could catch me. So then I realized I need to put the pedal to the metal. So then I sped up and ran laps about as fast as I could and easily outrun him. But that kind of was a scary moment that night. For the enduro race, but enduro races were fun. I kind of did the David Pearson move. I'd kind of hang back and let everybody else do what they want to do and have fun the first 5 or 10 laps, and I was just riding. And then I think I wound up winning about 3 or 4 of the enduro races, and I'd win a lot more running in as far as money because I'd win $1,000 running an enduro race, and I'd only win maybe $100 if I won the pure stock race, or maybe finish second or third at the late model race. I'd win $300 or $400, but those enduro races, they were good. So enjoyed enduro racing, thanks to Joe.